Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the second episode of FASTConversation. Today, we are talking to Angelo Malicsi, who was also a president of FASTCO. He completed his Master of Leadership in Organizational Learning at Monash University in July 2017. He was an Australia Award Scholar, and today we will talk to him about his experience about Australia Award Scholarship. Mike is now back in the Philippines with Chef Tony. Mike, hello. Pahinging popcorn. How are you?
Yeah, sure. The best popcorn in the world. Yes, I'm back in the Philippines. I'm happy to be part of this fast conversation, and I am pleased that I am on the second episode of this program.
Thank you, Mike. All right, let's dive in. So,
All right.
briefly tell us about the Australia Award Scholarship.
Okay. The Australia Award Scholarship is actually the flagship scholarship program of the government of Australia. They brand this as the prestigious international scholarships and fellowships that are funded by the Australian government to different citizens of developing countries in the Asia Pacific region. So that includes the Philippines, Indonesia, Vietnam, Papua New Guinea, and all these other nations that have a partnership with the Australian government.
Right. So, and tell us a little bit about how you prepared for your AAS application.
Wow. Okay. A lot of documentation. That was the first step that I had to prepare for, because the Australia Award Scholarship application will require you to submit documentations of your credentials. For one, your professional credentials. Two would be your academic credentials, and third, which is a unique part of the Australia Award Scholarship application for the Philippines, is your proposal for a re-entry action plan or program. So that plan or program, which is in short known as REAP, is a gauge for the Australia Award scholarships to find out how you can contribute to your community after obtaining your Australian degree. So that is also part of the screening process. So those are three things that someone or an applicant needs to prepare for an Australia Award scholarship. And those are the same things that I did during the application period.
How long was the application period?
Well,
So when was the deadline when you applied?
oh wow! If I recall it correctly, it took about a couple of months, probably 3 to 5 months would be the lead time for the application.
So
Because
is that when you lodge your application, you are notified after 5 months
yes,
about
that's
the
right.
result?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
sometime around that figure. So once they announce the call for applications, then they release a deadline. Deadline would be about a couple of months as well, and then once you lodge your application, then you will be notified after around 5 months, because they will need to screen and shortlist the candidates, and of course during that period they will need to conduct a panel interview and deliberation of all those who submitted their applications.
All right, so let me just run that by you again. So you submit your application
Right.
before the
Online.
deadline.
Yeah.
Yes, before the deadline, and then you are contacted for a panel interview, and
That's
then they
correct.
deliberate again. So that's
Yes.
that's basically it. You prepare
Yes.
your application, and then a panel interview, and then you get notified if you are
That's
selected.
correct. Yes. That's how
All
it.
right, great. But you mentioned about REAP,
Yeah.
the re-entry program,
Yeah.
and you said that aside from your credentials, your background, this is something that is critical to your application.
Right.
Could you tell us a little bit more about REAP?
Okay. The re-entry action plan, again, as I may have mentioned earlier, it is that program that you will need to implement, initiate, and undertake after graduating from an Australian institution or university, and then you go back to the Philippines, and then you choose a specific organization or community that will benefit from that REAP or from that plan or that program. So it is crucial because this is where the Australia Awards will assess whether you are indeed or you have the potential to become a global leader of development, because that's how the Australia Award intends to shape its recipients or its awardees. That after your program of study in Australia, then you emerge as a global leader of development. So the REAP will be a good yardstick for them to find out and assess whether you have the potential to be one.
What was your REAP?
Oh, my REAP, that's a good question. But my initial proposal was I intended to come up with an academic fellowship for teachers to be trained as leaders and innovators. So I called it something like a Leadership and Innovation for Teachers Academy. But that time, when I developed the REAP, it was a huge idea. It was one big bubble. So what one needs to know is that eventually, and through the process or through the duration of your program, you will need to narrow down and to uh, find ways how you can uh, limit the scope of your REAP, because you don't want to save the whole world, or you don't want to develop the whole world. You just want one community to benefit from what you intend to do. So you may need to put some uh, uh, limitations to what you intend to do.
So you mentioned that you changed it. How
I
has it
did.
changed?
I did. So what happened was that when I proposed my initial REAP, of course, I talked about it during the panel interview. There was a committee that constituted the deliberation. And if I can probably share this tip, the panel would be composed of a representative from the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade of Australia, representatives from the Australia Awards program in the Philippines, and also some other partners or some external interviewers or external panelists. So I discussed it extensively during the interview and what I really intended to do. But after the interview, I was advised by the panel to sort of tone down the scope of the REAP, because again, you don't want to be uh,
Too
cumbered.
ambitious.
Yeah, you don't want to be too ambitious, and
Mhm.
of course, because you're idealistic, sometimes the tendency is you want to change the whole world. But they advise us to tone it down. You can change your REAP in the process as long as
Okay.
you stay true to the essence and stay true to what the purpose is of your REAP. Then you're gonna be fine.
All right. Last question.
Sure.
Could you please share with us three most valuable strategies in applying for an AAS?
All right. The first strategy is that, again, as I said earlier, the documentation is really, really important. So you need to prepare your documents as appropriately, meticulously, and completely as you can. Make sure that you comply with all the requirements for documentation, obtain all the necessary papers, because you will be asked to get clearances from government offices, your transcript of records, and all other pertinent items that will be needed by the Australia Award Scholarship Committee. So you need to prepare these properly. And you make sure that I almost forgot, you need to take your IELTS as well, or your English language proficiency test. So you need to take that and make sure that your results are in by the time that the deadline is up. So, and if I can share, during my initial attempt for the Australia Awards, unfortunately, my IELTS results were released a day after the deadline. And I tried to appeal to the Australia Awards office for it to be considered, but given the strictness and the compliance, of the requirements, I was turned down. So I was not successful during my first attempt in 2014, I think. So only because I missed that out. So again, every single detail counts. Every single detail matters. So you have to make sure that everything is complete. So that's the first one. The second one is that uh, you need to prepare yourself. Not again, this is the other side of the coin. You don't prepare just the documentations. You also need to prepare yourself in all aspects of yourself, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, because you will never know when your application will be considered or not. So you have to prepare yourself. Prepare yourself for the best and prepare yourself for the worst. And third, which is another crucial thing, is that aside from preparing your documentation yourself, the third strategy is that you also need to prepare yourself for the results. So when it comes out, and if you're called for an interview, then that's another thing that you need to prepare. So those three things are crucial to any Australia Award scholarship application.
Right. Thank you for that, Mike. Any last words?
Australia Awards, as I mentioned earlier, is a prestigious international scholarship opportunity by and from the Australian government. It is something that will open up your world to a lot of things. It exposes you to not just Australia, but basically with the global scene out there. So, for those who are interested to study abroad and to gain that opportunity to be educated abroad, you take that opportunity and you try to open yourself up and step out of your comfort zone. And Australia Awards will definitely give you that chance.
Thank you so much, Mike.
You're welcome,
Those
Edna.
are indeed very valuable insights into Australia Awards.
I
Thank
appreciate it
you.
very much. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.